All right, guys, so this is the video for the Pythagorean theorem foldable. And I know some of you probably know the Pythagorean theorem, but we're going to practice it because there's a lot of common mistakes that people generally make with the Pythagorean theorem. So the first mistake people generally make is when they can use it. Okay, so the Pythagorean theorem can only be used with right triangles. Okay, if you don't have a right triangle, then you can't use the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, so in order to use it, we have to have a right angle. Okay, and not only can we only use it with right angles, we use it when we know two side lengths of a right triangle and want to know or need to know the third. Okay, so there's a couple things that you need to know with this. Okay, so most people know the Pythagorean theorem is a squared plus b squared equals c squared, but they don't know what a, b, and c stand for, and therefore this is useless. Okay, so what I like to say is the Pythagorean theorem is the leg squared plus the other leg squared equals the hypotenuse squared. Okay, now my hypotenuse is always the side that is the opposite of the right angle. Okay, so if my right angle's here, my hypotenuse is way over here. So I'm going to go ahead and write hypotenuse, and it's because it's the opposite of the right angle. Okay, now in a right triangle, you have the hypotenuse and then you have the legs. So the legs are the two sides that are not the hypotenuse. Okay, so I can say that this would be a leg and this would be another leg. Okay, now you do need to know the parts of a right triangle, so make sure you know these. All right, so let's do some examples of the Pythagorean theorem. So if you open up that first flap, you'll see some example problems on the inside, and these are the first few example problems. Okay, so remember, the leg squared plus the leg squared is going to equal the hypotenuse squared. Okay, and remember the hypotenuse is always opposite of your right angle. So the hypotenuse is opposite of the right angle. The hypotenuse is opposite of the right angle. So you know me, I like to color code things. And so what I always do is I always like to try to highlight the hypotenuse with the color. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and highlight each of those hypotenuse. Now I'm going to highlight the legs in another color. So this is a leg, and this is a leg. This is a leg, and this is a leg. This is a leg, and this is a leg. Okay, and that makes it real easy when I know the leg squared plus the leg squared is going to equal the hypotenuse squared. Okay, so my two legs here are 10 and 17. So I'm going to say 10 squared plus 17 squared is going to equal my hypotenuse squared, and my hypotenuse is my x. Okay, now 10 squared is 100. My 17 squared is 289. And 100 plus 289 is 389. Okay, now we spent a lot of time breaking down square roots, so we're going to break this down. Now, oddly enough, I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time on this one. 389 is a prime number, okay? So in order to undo a square, we square root, and we get the square root of 389 equals x. And because 389 is a prime number, I don't expect you to know that. Like on a test or something, I would not give you something that big and make you know that that's prime. But because that's a prime number, It doesn't reduce, so our x has to be the square root of 389. All right, let's look at B now. Okay, so once again, we want leg squared plus leg squared equals a hypotenuse squared, and I've highlighted the hypotenuse in blue. So I can say 10 squared plus 5 squared, x squared plus 5 squared equals 10 squared. So x squared plus 5 squared is 25 equals 10 squared is 100. Minus 25 on both sides. I get x squared equals 75. Okay, now to undo a square, we would square root both sides, so I'd get x equals square root of 75. And then once again, I'm going to go ahead and break down square root of 75. Okay, so 5 goes into 75 15 times. 5 goes into 15 3 times. 3 goes into 3 1 time. I circle my pairs. Pairs go on the outside. My leftovers go in the fridge. So my x equals 5 square root of 3. All right, let's go ahead and look at C. So we have our leg squared plus our leg squared equals our hypotenuse squared. And I've highlighted our hypotenuse blue, so our 25 is our hypotenuse. So I could say 24 squared plus x squared is equal to 25 squared. Okay, now 24 squared is 576 plus x squared equals 625 minus 576 minus 576. So I get x squared equals 49. To undo a square, you square root it. So I get x equals, and you guys should know square root of 49 is 7. So that is my other leg. All right, so I want you guys to do D on your own, but I'm going to go ahead and get you started a little bit. So remember, leg squared plus leg squared equals my hypotenuse squared. Okay, and then I'm going to highlight my hypotenuse blue, so opposite of my right angle, this is going to be my hypotenuse. And then I want you to notice, I'm going to highlight my legs in yellow. I want you to notice that this side is 8, and it has the single hash mark. And the single hash mark is right here, which means this side has to also be 8. Okay, so use that. I've done the hard part for you. Go ahead and solve for x. All right, so my leg squared plus my leg squared is my hypotenuse squared. So my leg squared is yellow. So 8 squared plus 8 squared equals my x squared. So I set up my equation here. Remember, 8 squared is 64. And when you add the two 64s, you get 128 equals x squared. Okay, so to undo a square, you have to take the square root. So you get square root of 128 equals x. And then we have to go back and simplify the square root, which is what I did here. Okay, you guys should be just pros at doing this now. And when you do that, you get the square root of, or 8 times the square root of 2 is going to equal x. All right, let's look at E, which is a word problem, and we will get a day where all we do is work on word problems, or a worksheet that all we do is look on word problems anyways. And it says a ladder is leaning against the side of a 10-meter house. If the base of the house is 3 meters, if the base of the, it should be ladder. If the base of the ladder is 3 meters away from the house, how tall is the ladder? Okay, so we have this house here, and then our roof starts right here. Okay, now here's our grass. And if we have this ladder that goes up like here to the top of the house, okay, here's our ladder. We know this is a right angle because houses hopefully go straight up. And the side of the house is 10 meters, and the base of the ladder is 3 meters away. Okay, how tall is the ladder? So I'm going to say this is x. Okay, so we have a right triangle. We know 2 side lengths. We want to find the third. We use Pythagorean theorem. Okay, I'm going to highlight the hypotenuse. Remember, the hypotenuse is opposite of a right angle. And then I'm going to highlight the legs, yellow. Okay? Now, I can say 3 squared plus 10 squared, leg squared plus leg squared, is going to equal by hypotenuse squared. Okay, so 9 plus 10 squared is 100 equals x squared. So 109 equals x squared. Undo a square, you take the square root. So square root of 109 equals x. And guys, that doesn't simplify, so this would be our final answer.